now 3 o'clock according to my iPhone, Cupertino Daylight Time. And we have two members present, so we have a quorum. So, Mr. Lib, tell me when we can begin.
You can begin anytime you want.
Okay, we're rolling?
We're rolling.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the February 2nd, Tuesday, February 2nd meeting of the Transportation Committee of the Los Angeles City Council. I am Councilmember Mike Bonin, the chair of the committee. I am joined currently by my colleague Paul Koretz, and look forward to being joined shortly by our colleague Joe Buscaino. We are meeting as a result of the pandemic and provisions that Governor Newsom has invoked as part of his emergency order electronically today. And members of the public who would like to offer comment on any of the items before us today can do so by calling 669-254-5252. Let me repeat that, 669-254-5252, and using meeting ID number 161-750-5079, and then pressing pound. Then press pound again when prompted for a participant ID. And once admitted into the meeting, press *9 to request to speak. We have 4 items on the agenda today. What I'm going to suggest we do is before we do public comment, we will start with the General Manager's report and presentation.
Great. Thanks, Councilmember Bonin. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay. All right.
Yes, we can. And just for the record, this is item number 4, which is the General Manager's report.
So thank you, Councilmember Bonin. This is Salita Reynolds, the General Manager for the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. And before we start with city business, I wanted to respectfully request that the committee take a moment of silence to remember LADOT staff that we lost this last year in 2020. In normal times, we would all get together and provide each other support and celebrate the lives of these incredible public servants. But we can't do that. And we can't do a lot of the things that bring us comfort while we mourn. And, you know, in the course of my duties, one of the things I do is give out service pins. And it won't surprise anybody on this committee to know that many of the people who work for LADOT have spent their entire lives with the department. They've been here for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years or more. And so they really do become like family. And I appreciate the space that you've given us to come together and to remember these staff. I've invited the families and loved ones and colleagues of the 8 staff we remember today, so some of them have joined us. I'm going to read off their names. There's a lot that I would love to say about each one of them and their contributions, but for the moment, I would ask that we take a minute of silence to remember them and hold their families in our thoughts and prayers. And so I'm going to read their names and just ask for a moment of silence. So this year, we remember David Gonzalez, Community Information Representative, Kimberly Ellis, Traffic Officer 2, Curtis Jones, Signal System Electrician, Kartik Patel, Transportation Engineer, Bradley Poindexter, Crossing Guard, Marilyn Menifee, Crossing Guard, Daniel Miramontes, Crossing Guard, and Lourdes Cuevas, Crossing Guard.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. In the name and the memory of these parents, these children, these siblings, these neighbors, these co-workers, and their families which have suffered such deep and profound loss, let's all take a moment of silence. Thank you. I'd like to thank Ms. Reynolds for putting this together, and I'd like to just acknowledge the presence of the families that are here participating, and express on behalf of the City Council and the City family deepest condolences for your loss. Um, the, the family members that you've lost were also members of our family, who put the people of Los Angeles first every day, who contributed to something greater, and who gave service as a reflexive gesture of their daily lives. And we thank you for sharing them with us, and we grieve that you have not had them as part of your daily life longer. Mr. Buscaino or Koretz, would either of you like to say anything? Mr. Koretz?
Yeah, thank you also for bringing this presentation together. We are sorry to have lost members of our city family. I'm pleased that we are recognizing them for their significant contributions to the city, and we join the families in mourning their loss and offer that they may rest in peace.
Thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Reynolds. Was there anything else in today's Journal Manager's report?
No, I'll just add one sort of addendum to that presentation. Thank you again. Is that we will be creating a digital memorial for LEDOT family to be able to share some of their recollections. And so for everybody who's listening in, and for the coworkers, and colleagues, and families of those that we've lost, we'll be sending out that, sharing that information, and of course allowing the families to lead the way with their memories. And then we'll provide a place for us to sort of add some things that, you know, they may not have ever known about their friends and family members. I know that actually AGM Dan Mitchell relayed to me that he had an opportunity to share some stories about Councilmember Tom LaBonge, who recently passed away, with his wife, and that some of the stories that Dan shared were a surprise to Councilmember LaBonge's wife. And so we've all shared stories with her as well. And I think sometimes, you know, that was a little bit of a surprise to me, because everything was out there with Councilmember LaBonge. Nothing was a secret. And so I was delighted that there were things that actually his wife didn't know about him. So the same is probably true of a lot of the people who worked alongside of us at DOT. So we hope that we can provide that digital memorial, and it will be a source of comfort for those families.
That's a great idea. Mr. Kretz, do you have your hand up again?
I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask questions not related to the memorial, but to Ms. Reynolds' presence on the agenda.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question, I know that we passed an item in council a few days ago on mask enforcement. And although I don't think DOT is expected to be a primary participant, certainly DOT personnel are among the more widespread across the city of any city department. And particularly individuals writing parking citations. So they, I'm sure, are frequently passed by people that are unmasked, and not asking that they write citations or any other steps in that direction, but they could easily note to people that they should be wearing a mask, and have a few masks on them and offer them to people passing by without them. And I don't know if the department has thought about this opportunity, how often it's done now, but it could easily be in the course of daily business done without taking more than a few seconds of time, but perhaps prevent someone from passing along the disease to another.
Thank you for the question. As you might have noticed, the federal government actually released through the TSA a federal mask requirement for all passengers and operators on any form of surface transportation. So as far as on transit goes, LADOT has had masks available for anybody who rides our system for several months now, and we're keep that up. The TSA has now requested that we provide any information on mask enforcement that escalates to law enforcement to a central command. So we are taking in there, we're still sort of studying the rulemaking and the protocols and taking that under advisement for how we address our public transit riders. As far as the parking enforcement traffic control officers go, their primary training for their jobs is really in de-escalation and making sure that they don't end up in a situation that might invite conflict. And just in the last week, we've had 3 officer assaults that have occurred. One directing traffic down by LAX, and the other 2 in the course of their duties writing tickets. So I had not considered whether or not those frontline staff might play a role in getting widespread mask use. And I would want to really think about that with our training division and our professional standards group to sort of consider, how that meshes with the other training they've had, and also how it meshes with the, I would call it a general rise in aggressive behavior towards parking enforcement traffic control officers generally, and whether or not, confronting somebody who isn't wearing a mask and, trying to give them a mask might put officers, in harm's way. But we will certainly take that under advisement. We don't have any sort of citation writing authority over that kind of a violation of the law. Having a few extra masks available for those who are open and interested and might want one is a good idea. So we can take that into consideration and see if we might be able to fold that into our operation.
And perhaps even in offering them in the most gentle of ways would still be an opportunity. And I suspect a lot less confrontational than somebody finding a traffic control officer or traffic officer writing a ticket and placing it on their windshield. So hopefully, if they could note that it's required and they might be able to keep them from getting a ticket, and here's a mask for that purpose, it could be done in a gentle way that doesn't involve confrontation. Presumably, those that have ACE citation writing capabilities in other departments might be a little more aggressive, but this would be a sort of a gentle reminder, but an easy opportunity because parking officers are everywhere.
Happy to take that under consideration.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So before we take any further action, now would be an appropriate time to take public comment. Mr. Bruins, do we have any speakers in the queue?
We do not.
Okay, we do not have any public comment today. Then I recommend we receive the general manager's report. Thank you for that. Do we need to vote on receiving that, Mr. Lid?
No, that's a discussion item, so there's no formal action.
Okay, thank you very much. So that leaves items 1, 2, and 3 on today's agenda. I understand there's a technical correction on item 3. Is that true?
Yes, Maurice is around through the CLA's office. We'd like to recommend that you approve as amended item number 3 and revise as follows. The now therefore be resolved clause would be amended to read that the City Council pursuant to California Vehicle Code Section 22507 hereby prohibits the parking of vehicles that are in excess of 20 feet in length or over 84 inches in height during the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. on the following street segments, except where more restrictive regulations are already in effect. So that's the change. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that amendment read into the record, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve items 1 through 3 if anybody was interested in so moving.
Move approval?
Okay, great. So Mr. Kretz has seconded. Let's vote on that. Oh, no, Mr. Kretz is not seconding. Mr. Kretz is raising his hand.
That was not a second. I was asking that we pull item 2 for just a tiny bit of discussion.
Okay.
And I'd second item 1 and 3 for a vote.
Okay, Mr. Lib, let's vote on that one.
All right. Councilmember Bonin,
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz,
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Very good.
Okay, let's go to item number 2.
Item number 2, LADOT report relative to the Caltrans 2021-2022 Sustainable Communities and Strategic Partnerships Grant Program and recommended projects.
Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question. I'm glad we're updating the data forecasting at this time. I just want to make sure that we're planning for both the short term and the long term, in that we may be looking at handling things differently during the pandemic, and changes that might be necessary in the very short term, and then a slightly different plan for the new normal and what that might look like in a year or two once we're completely past the pandemic. So I would encourage us to do that as part of this project.
I believe DOT's Rubina Gazarian is online.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I think I lost connection temporarily, but I am here now. I'm Rubina Ghazarian with LADOT's Transportation Planning and Policy Division. Perhaps I could provide a quick overview of the grant. So LADOT is requesting authorization to submit 2 grant applications to the Caltrans 2021-2022 Sustainable Communities and Strategic Partnerships Grant Program solicitation. A total of $17 million is available through this competitive grant for eligible applicants in the state of California. LADOT and Streets LA proposed to submit 1 grant application each for funding consideration. The 2 proposed projects, the first that LADOT is applying for would fund the update to the transportation demand forecasting model and the city's VMT calculator. This is following the SCAG, the release of SCAG's updated 2020 model. Streets LA would proposes to apply for funding to develop a criteria database and prioritization plan to demonstrate the nexus between climate resiliency and active transportation that could reduce the impacts of climate change in vulnerable communities. This grant application has a required minimum local match of 11.47%, which would require a total of approximately 160,000 in local match, for which the department's proposed using Proposition C funds. And the project selection process included seeking planning projects of the highest need that are technical in nature and have unmet funding needs. So just as a next step, I think in response to the question, in which to be sure that this covers both near and long-term planning post-COVID, I think that is that would be the direct result of, I could speak perhaps more specifically to LADOT's project, which would be updating the current transportation demand forecasting model, which was last updated in 2016. So it would be looking at conditions starting in 2020, and that would include of course, the changes due to to transportation behavior as a result of the global pandemic. That is data that LADOT is collecting, and it is of course data that we're really interested in expanding upon as part of, we're working on the scope of work at the moment and looking at tools and ways to be able to expand there. So I will pause there and see if my colleagues from Streets LA would like to respond on behalf of their project.
Hi,
Good
this is,
afternoon.
oh, go ahead, Kevin.
This is Kevin Min with Bureau Street Services. I think the request, Councilman, about including COVID into this long-term model. I mean, I think you were discussing the LADOT project, not so much the Streets LA project. But with regards to our project, we can certainly look at how we can incorporate those kinds of metrics into the nexus between climate resiliency and active transportation. And there may be some nexus with COVID as well.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Kurtz?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we were looking at that and taking it into account as we move forward with this.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve this item?
Second.
We have a motion. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Lidd, let's take
Aye.
Yes, Councilmember Bonnet,
Aye.
Councilmember Koretz,
Aye.
Councilmember Buscaino.
Aye.
Very good.
All right. That item is approved, and I believe that clears the desk. Am I correct, Mr. Clerk?
This clears the desk.
All right. Thank you both. We
Thank you,
are
Mr.
now
Chair.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good one.